Harry Potter and the Echoes of Grimmauld Place. An Unofficial Wizarding Christmas Tale. Written by S. Roob. Chapter 1. The Empty House.
Harry left Grimmauld Place before the sky had decided what it wanted to be. London was that particular shade of winter grey that looked like it could snow or rain or do nothing at all, just hang there, stubborn and silent. The street lamps were still lit, their glow thin against the dark brick and iron railings. The cold pressed into his cheeks and knuckles like a reminder that he was still a person with skin, still alive, still expected to feel things at normal times, on normal days. Christmas Eve was a normal day to everyone else. To Harry, it was an anniversary dressed in tinsel. He paused at the gate, hand on the latch, listening for a second to the house behind him. There was always some sound now. A faint shuffle. A distant mutter. The soft clink of something being set down and picked up again. Harry let himself breathe once, steadying, then stepped out into the street and pulled his coat tighter. He did not look back. He did not need to. Grimmauld Place had a way of watching even when it was quiet. He made it to the end of the block, the air sharp in his throat, then apparat. Back in London, Grimmauld Place did not mind that Harry had gone. It had been a house before it had been his, and it learned long ago how to fill itself with its own moods. It held its silence like a habit, its shadows like a family trait. But there was movement within it now, purposeful and sharp. Creature was awake. Creature was always awake. He'd been up since before the street lamps dimmed. He scrubbed the entryway until the black and white tiles shone. He polished the banister. He muttered to himself the entire time, a low stream of commentary that would have been insulting if anyone else had understood half of it. Creature cleans, creature prepares, he said, pushing a cloth into the corner of the stair where dust liked to collect. Creature makes the house respectable, even if Master Harry is stubborn and thinks he can hide from family forever. He paused, head tilted, listening. Then he sniffed. Creature knows, he added, and resumed scrubbing with renewed force. In the kitchen, the kettle sat on the stove, already warm. A pot of stew simmered low. The smell was rich and steady, like something meant to soften the sharp edges of a day. Creature made too much, on purpose. If he made too much, then people would have to eat. If people ate, then they would sit. If they sat, then maybe they would stay. If they stayed, then maybe Master Harry would not be alone in the way he was alone, even when he was standing right there. Creature did not know how to say any of that. So he made stew and scrubbed tiles until his hands hurt. Above, in the drawing room, the curtains were drawn tight. The chandelier was clean. The portraits were still, for once, as if even they understood that this was a day for a certain kind of restraint. All except one. The portrait of Walburga Black had been moved. At precisely 9 o'clock, the air in the entry hall shifted. It was not loud. Grimmauld Place never tolerated spectacle. It was a pressure change, the faint sense of something being claimed rather than entered. Molly Weasley appeared first, boots planting themselves on the polished tiles like she had always known where they would land. Arthur followed half a step behind, holding a covered dish in both hands with careful seriousness. Ron and George arrived next, nearly shoulder to shoulder, muttering about whether George had packed the right jumper. Ginny came last, not because she hesitated, but because she looked. "Well," Molly said briskly, tugging off her gloves, already scanning the hall. "We're in." Ron frowned. "You didn't knock." Molly shot him a look. "Why would I?" Arthur glanced around, eyes bright with interest. It's brighter than I remember. That'll be Creature, Ginny said. You can smell it. As if summoned, Creature appeared at the foot of the stairs, stiff-backed and watchful. Mistress Weasley, he said, bowing low. Creature welcomes Mistress Weasley and family to the house. Molly didn't waste time. Where is he? Creature's mouth tightened. Master Harry is not home, he said. The words landed heavier than anyone expected. Ron let out a short laugh. You're joking. Creature did not blink. Ginny's jaw set. How long? Since before dawn, Creature replied. Master Harry left. Molly exhaled once, slow and controlled, then squared her shoulders. Of course he did, she said. Of course. Arthur cleared his throat gently. Shall I put this down, Molly? Yes, Molly said at once. Kitchen. We're not leaving. Ron opened his mouth, then closed it again. Ginny was already moving. He'll be back. She said it like a fact. Molly shrugged out of her coat and draped it over the banister. Grimmauld Place accepted the gesture without complaint. Right, she said. Let's make this place warm. The kitchen filled in layers. A cupboard opened. A drawer slid shut. The kettle began to tick. Arthur set his dish down with care. Molly's voice moved easily through the space, assigning tasks no one questioned. Creature hovered at the threshold, watching. The stew will be ready for lunch, he said at last, grudging and proud all at once. Creature made enough. Molly turned immediately. That's lovely, Creature. Thank you. Creature sniffed, but did not correct her. A knife struck a cutting board. A chair scraped. George said something under his breath that made Ron snort. Ginny leaned against the counter, arms crossed, listening, as if committing the sound to memory. Upstairs, the house remained quiet. Downstairs, Grimmauld Place filled with the ordinary business of people staying. Harry Potter was still not home. And the kitchen did not wait for him.
Chapter 2. Double Parked.
Grimmauld Place had learned how to hold people without announcing them. It had been doing so since morning. The first arrivals came quietly, the way family does when they know the path already. The kitchen filled before the house could protest, voices layering over one another, the scrape of chairs, the steady rhythm of Molly Weasley claiming the stove as if it had always been hers. Ginny worked beside her, efficient and wordless, the two of them moving in practiced orbit. Arthur sat at the table with Ron and George, listening more than speaking, smiling at things that didn't need to be said aloud. The house shifted, displeased but resigned. Then the front hall stirred again. Hermione arrived with Charlie Weasley in a rush of cold air and laughter, boots scuffing, coats shrugged off too quickly. Hermione's eyes swept the room instinctively, already cataloguing who was present, who wasn't. Charlie followed her gaze, said nothing, and clapped Ron on the shoulder instead. It smells real, he said approvingly. Molly beamed. Sit. Both of you. They barely settled when the house flexed again. This time it was louder. Bill and Fleur came in with snow on their coats and Teddy between them, bundled and bright-eyed. The child let out a delighted sound the moment he was set down, hair shifting color as he laughed. Ginny abandoned her knife immediately. Well, George said. Now it's official. Creature appeared at the edge of the room, arms folded, eyes sharp. Too many people, he muttered. Just enough. No one contradicted him. Time passed differently after that. The kitchen grew warmer. Voices overlapped. Someone laughed too loud, then quieter, then again. The house listened, suspicious but attentive, like something not used to being needed this way. Outside, a car pulled up and stopped. No one inside noticed. Harry apparat at the end of the street and knew immediately that something was wrong. A car sat at the curb where nothing ever sat today. Ordinary, badly parked, its engine ticking as it cooled. Two figures stood beside it, looking up and down the row of houses with growing irritation. Harry sighed and dropped the disillusionment charm. Petunia turned first. Vernon followed, scowling. Dudley stood apart, hands in his pockets, older now, uncertain. "What are you doing here?" Harry asked, quietly. Vernon snorted. "We were invited. By some of your lot." He gestured vaguely, as though magic were a poor neighborhood association. Harry blinked. Then, faintly, he heard it. Laughter. A clatter. A voice he hadn't realized he was listening for. Harry closed his eyes for half a second. "Right," he said, opening them again. "You'll need to park properly. The neighbors don't like it when things don't line up." Vernon bristled. "And where exactly are we meant to?" Harry opened the gate. The street did not notice. Petunia gasped softly. Dudley stared, then smiled, quick and startled, as if he'd just been let in on a secret he'd known was there all along. "Follow me," Harry said. They stepped through. The house accepted them. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Teddy laughed while Wobble running to Harry's arms. Harry smiled without thinking. The kitchen was full. Not crowded, exactly, but alive in a way Grimmauld Place rarely allowed. Molly Weasley stood at the stove, sleeves rolled, stirring something that smelled like comfort. Ginny was beside her, chopping with practiced ease. Arthur sat at the table, deep in conversation with George and Ron, who broke off at the sound of footsteps. "Well," Arthur said, standing. "This explains the stew." Molly recovered first. She always did. "Harry," she said. And for the first time that day, Grimmauld Place understood exactly what kind of Christmas this was going to be.
Chapter 3. Memories for the House.
Grimmauld Place did not know how to hold conversations politely. It absorbed them instead. Arthur Weasley had Dudley cornered near the sideboard, both of them leaning slightly toward a glass-fronted cabinet filled with crystal decanters and cup vases that caught the light at sharp angles. "So it's not magic," Arthur was saying, delighted. "It's interaction. Elements behaving under pressure." Dudley nodded, warming. "Chemistry. It's all systems. You can predict reactions if you understand the bonds." Arthur's eyes shone. "Remarkable. Entire worlds without wands." Nearby, Vernon and Petunia pretended not to be listening. Vernon examined a vase with deliberate disinterest, hands clasped behind his back, chin lifted. Petunia traced the edge of a glass bowl with one careful finger, as though assessing whether it was trying too hard. "It's excessive," Vernon muttered. Petunia hummed in agreement, eyes flicking once more to the display. In the kitchen doorway, Charlie was talking animatedly with Bill, hands describing something large and dangerous. "Nearly took the roof with it," Charlie said. One sweep of the tail and the whole containment ward flared. "We had to reset half the rooms." Molly pressed a hand to her chest. "Charlie." Bill grinned. "Sounds about right." Charlie laughed. You should see the scorch marks. Across the room, Ginny sat on the arm of a chair beside a pregnant but barely showing Fleur, who held Teddy securely on her lap. The child was fascinated by Ginny's hair, fingers curling into it as his own shifted color with his mood. They moved me up, Ginny said, casual but pleased. Starting rotation. Coach says I've got speed they can't teach. Fleur smiled, warm and proud. You always fly like you mean it. Teddy squealed, hair flashing briefly pink. Ginny laughed and tickled his side. That's approval, yeah? Near the hearth, Ron and Hermione had fallen into an easy rhythm, half listening to everything at once. It's strange, Hermione said softly. Being here. All of us. Ron nodded. Good strange. Creature watched from the edge of the room, arms crossed, mouth set in a line that was almost satisfied. Too many people. Just enough. The house creaked. The fire settled. Somewhere above them, a portrait shifted in its frame and stayed silent. Grimmauld Place was full. And it was learning, slowly, how to like it.
Chapter 4. Solitude.
Harry left the room without announcing it. It wasn't avoidance. It was instinct. Grimmauld Place had filled itself thoroughly, every corner occupied, every sound accounted for. The house no longer needed him to stand in the middle of it. He took the stairs 2 at a time, then slowed, fingers brushing the banister out of habit. The upper floors were dimmer, cooler. The noise below softened into something distant and indistinct, like the memory of a crowd rather than the crowd itself. His room waited at the end of the hall. It was still spare, despite the size. Harry had never known what to do with space that didn't ask anything of him. A bed neatly made. A chair by the window. The trunk at the foot, closed but not locked. He sat on the edge of the mattress and let the quiet settle. Downstairs, someone laughed. Someone else answered. A chair scraped. A child squealed briefly, delighted. Harry leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and closed his eyes. For a long time after the war, silence meant danger. The kind that arrived without warning. The kind that took. This silence was different. It held. A soft knock came at the door. Harry opened his eyes but didn't answer immediately. Harry, Ginny said from the other side. Not loud. Not careful. Just there. He stood and opened the door. She stepped in without comment, shutting it behind her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Ginny took in the room the way she always did, like she was reading something written between the lines. Crowded, she said finally. Yeah. She smiled, small and knowing. Good. They stood near the window, shoulders almost touching. Outside, the street was dark and unremarkable, pretending nothing unusual had happened at all. Ginny broke the silence first. I'm first rotation, she said. Properly. Hollyhead. Harry looked at her. I know. She blinked. You do? Course I do. She laughed quietly. Right. They leaned against the sill, close enough now that the space between them felt intentional. Not urgent. Just chosen. Outside, snow fell in a quiet, deliberate way, gathering along the iron railings and the edges of the pavement. A single street lamp flickered, its light turning the flakes gold for a second before they vanished. Ginny shifted first. Not away. Into him. Her shoulder rested against his chest, her head just beneath his chin. Harry's arm came around her without thought, settling at her waist like it had always known where to go. They watched the snow for a moment, breathing in time. "I used to hate winter," Ginny said softly. Everything felt suspended. Harry nodded. "Me too." She turned her head then, just enough to look at him. He looked down at her, green meeting brown, the years between them folding inward all at once. "You don't disappear anymore," she said. "I still try sometimes." She smiled, not amused, not sad. "Honest." "I know." Ginny lifted her hand, fingers brushing the collar of his coat, grounding him. "You don't have to tonight." Harry's breath caught. He leaned down before doubt could speak. The kiss was immediate. Certain. Not tentative in the way first kisses are, but not hurried either. It carried memory and survival and the relief of finding something intact after everything else already burned. Ginny's hand slid to his neck. Harry pulled her closer, steady, deliberate, as if anchoring them both to the moment. When they parted, they stayed close, foreheads touching. "Merry Christmas," Ginny whispered. Harry smiled, real and unguarded. "Yeah. It is." Below them, Grimmauld Place creaked softly, adjusting again, as if it approved. Harry didn't move. Neither did she.
Chapter 5. Yours, but my sister.
Ginny was the one who suggested they go back down. Not with words, with movement. She slipped her hand into Harry's and gave it a small squeeze, the kind that wasn't a question. They left the room together, the hallway dim and quiet, the sounds below growing clearer with each step. At the bottom of the stairs, the house opened up again. Voices drifted from the kitchen. Someone laughed. Plates clinked. The ordinary noise of people occupying space without apology filled the air. They stopped just outside the small sitting room off the hall. Ginny turned to him, rose onto her toes, and pressed a brief kiss to his forehead. It was gentle, deliberate, like a bookmark placed exactly where it belonged. "I'll give you a minute," she said softly. Harry nodded. She slipped away toward the kitchen, already being pulled back into the gravity of the room. Harry stepped into the sitting room and leaned against the window, letting the noise exist without needing to join it. A moment later, Petunia appeared in the doorway. She didn't knock. She never had. "Harry," she said. He turned. "Yeah." She held something against her chest, a small parcel wrapped neatly in plain paper. Not flashy. Careful. "I want a word, Harry," she said in a direct, but not commanding manner. He nodded once. "Sure." She stepped inside and closed the door behind her, leaving it slightly ajar, like she wasn't planning to stay long. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Petunia's eyes moved around the room, cataloguing the space the way she always had, tidy, deliberate, searching for things out of place. "This house," she said finally. "It's grand." Harry almost smiled. "It's old," he said. "That does most of the work." She huffed softly, then looked down at the parcel in her hands. "I brought these for you," she said, holding it out. "They're not from us." "Not really." Harry took it carefully. "Okay. You don't have to open them now," she added quickly. "I want to." He unwrapped it slowly. Inside were photographs. The first was Lily and James on their wedding day, younger than Harry had ever seen them, caught mid-laugh, James's tie crooked, Lily's hair loose around her shoulders. Petunia's voice came quieter. "I was there," she said. I stood right there, actually. I remember thinking she looked unbearably happy. Harry swallowed. The second photograph showed Lily alone, sitting in a stone courtyard, wand raised in concentration as tiny figures moved across the image at her feet. "Fourth year," Petunia said. She wrote to tell me she'd finally figured out how to make the pictures move properly. She was so proud. Harry smiled, small and aching. The last item was heavier. A necklace, delicate, worn smooth with age. She had that as a girl, Petunia said. Long before everything. Mum gave it to her. Harry closed his fingers around it. I didn't know what to do with them, Petunia went on, stiff now, words practiced but imperfect. Keeping them felt wrong. Giving them away felt worse. She hesitated, then added, "They belonged with you." Harry looked up at her. "Thank you," he said, "and meant all of it." Petunia nodded sharply, as if that were all she allowed herself. For a moment, they stood there, history pressing close, uncomfortable and undeniable. Then, awkwardly, Petunia stepped forward and hugged him. It wasn't graceful. More a pat and a brief hold than an embrace. Her hand pressed once against his shoulder, then retreated. "There," she said briskly. "That's enough of that." Harry didn't laugh. But he didn't pull away either. Petunia straightened her coat, squared her shoulders, and moved toward the door. "Christmas," she said, as if it explained everything. "Yes," Harry replied. She paused with her hand on the knob, then left without looking back. Harry remained where he was, photographs in one hand, necklace warm in the other. Down the hall, the house murmured on. And for the first time, something that had been kept too long was finally where it belonged.
Chapter 6. Nighttime Arrangements.
It was Ron who said it first. "What's Christmas without a tree?" The room paused, as if the house itself were considering the question. Harry looked up from where he'd been standing near the fireplace. "I didn't think about it." Molly turned on him at once. "Of course you didn't." Ginny rolled her eyes, smiling. "You never do." Before Harry could protest, Molly had her wand out. There was a sharp, decisive flick, and the air in the main sitting room shifted. A tall pine appeared at once, rooted firmly into the floorboards as though it had always belonged there. 8 feet at least, full and green, its branches heavy and fragrant. The room broke into delighted noise. "Oh, it's beautiful," Hermione said. Fleur clapped once, pleased. "It is missing something." With a graceful sweep of her wand, boxes appeared around the base of the tree, stacked neatly, lids already sliding open to reveal ornaments and ribbons and glass baubles that caught the firelight. George whistled. "Show off." Fleur smiled sweetly. "Oh, you way." Someone, Harry wasn't sure who, laughed and said, "We should decorate it the Muggle way." That did it. Ginny was already pulling ornaments free. Ron untangled a string of lights with exaggerated seriousness. Hermione crouched near one of the boxes, sorting colors with quiet efficiency. Teddy crawled toward the lowest branches, delighted, his hair flashing briefly gold as he reached. The room filled with motion. Harry stepped back. He watched it all for a moment, the way people moved without waiting for instruction, the way the house absorbed it, adjusted, allowed it. The tree stood tall and solid, already claiming the space. "I'm going to pop out," Harry said. Molly turned. "Pop out where?" "Errand," he replied lightly. Ginny narrowed her eyes. At this hour? Harry shrugged. Somewhere's always open. She smiled like she knew exactly what that meant. Don't be long. He grabbed his coat and slipped out before anyone could stop him. When Harry returned, the house barely resembled itself. Lights were strung along the banisters and door frames, warm and soft, looping the stair rails and winding their way up the walls. The tree glowed, heavy with ornaments, some magical, some clearly not. Paper chains ran between doorways. Someone had convinced the house to tolerate tinsel. Voices carried everywhere. They were singing. Off-key. Loud. Unapologetic. Harry paused just inside the door, smiling to himself. Vernon Dursley cleared his throat. The singing faltered. Now that we're all here, Vernon said, stiff and formal, perhaps someone could explain the sleeping arrangements. Molly turned slowly. Explain? Vernon gestured around. It's been a long drive. Petunia and I require space. Ron muttered something under his breath. Harry should take the main bedroom, Hermione said at once. Obviously, Ginny added. Yes, Molly agreed. It's his house. Vernon bristled. Absolutely not. Harry blinked. What? Vernon straightened. We are guests. Harry stared at him for a second, then sighed. Fine, he said. Take it. The room went quiet again. Harry continued, already organizing it in his head. Ron and I will share. Bill and Fleur can have a room, if you don't mind Teddy staying with you. Fleur smiled. Of course. Mum and Dad together, Harry went on. Charlie and George. Hermione and Ginny. He paused. That leaves one spare for Dudley to have a room. Vernon's face reddened. This is highly irregular. Harry met his eyes, calm and immovable. It's Christmas. The house creaked softly, like it was storing the moment for later. Somewhere above them, a portrait shifted in its frame. Harry didn't notice. But the house did.
Chapter 7. The Noble House of Black.
Grimmauld Place waited until it was satisfied. Lights dimmed gradually along the upper floors. Doors closed. Footsteps faded. Somewhere, Teddy whimpered once and was soothed almost immediately. The house counted these things, catalogued them, settled them into place. Vernon Dursley did not settle. The master bedroom was large, high-ceilinged, and thoroughly offensive to his sensibilities. He paced its length with short, irritated steps, tugging at the collar of his dressing gown and glaring at the walls as if they were conspiring. This place, he muttered, stopping to prod the bedside table. Nothing practical. Nothing solid. All show. Petunia smoothed the coverlet without looking at him. And that elf, Vernon went on, warming to it now. Sleeping in a cupboard like it's normal. Disgusting. The house inhaled. From the wall opposite the bed came the sound of a throat clearing. It was not polite. It was practiced. Vernon froze mid-step. Petunia's hand stilled on the coverlet. Then the scream came. Filth. The word detonated. It tore through the room, through the corridor, down the stairwell, vibrating in the bones of the house itself. Unclean vermin infesting this noble home. Vernon shouted back instinctively. What is that? Humiliating the very stones with their presence. Vernon spun, eyes wild. Petunia, there's a woman in the wall. Half-breeds, blood traitors, parasites. Doors opened along the corridor. Ron leaned out of his room, rubbing his eyes. Yep. Ginny appeared beside him, already grinning. Told you. George poked his head out next. 10 minutes, easy. Bill stood in the doorway across the hall, arms folded, watching with professional interest. Fleur appeared behind him, Teddy half asleep on her shoulder, blinking curiously at the noise. Oh, Fleur said pleasantly. She has opinions. Wahlburger Black raged on, her face contorted with satisfaction, eyes blazing as she catalogued sins real and imagined with surgical enthusiasm. You dare to sleep under my roof? Vernon backed into the bed, nearly tripping. Make it stop. Petunia stood rigid, her face pale, eyes fixed on the portrait as if staring too hard might make it disappear. Down the hall, Hermione arrived quietly, taking in the scene with one glance. Charlie leaned against the wall beside her, arms crossed. She's thorough, Charlie murmured. Arthur Weasley climbed the stairs last, peering up over his glasses. He listened for a moment, nodded thoughtfully, and said, "Ah." Harry appeared at the end of the corridor. He stopped. He took in the entire scene, the frozen Dursleys, the assembled family, the portrait in full, unrestrained fury, and did nothing at all. Wahlburger screamed. The house creaked. Ron snorted, then clapped a hand over his mouth. Ginny leaned closer to Hermione. She'll go for a while yet. Vernon rounded on Harry, desperate now. Do something. Harry tilted his head slightly, considering. Wahlburger's voice rose again, triumphant. You will never be clean. Creature appeared beside Harry, hands clasped neatly behind his back. Creature suggested the largest room, he said calmly. Mistress Black prefers an audience. Harry exhaled through his nose. Fair enough, he said. Wahlburger continued, volume unwavering, venom now settling into a steady, satisfied rhythm. Slowly, very slowly, the tension broke. George laughed first. Not loud. Just a breath he couldn't hold in any longer. Ron followed. Ginny didn't bother hiding it. Even Arthur smiled. Vernon sputtered, turning in a tight circle. You think this is funny? Harry finally raised his wand. Not in a hurry. Not angry. Just done. Silencio. The portrait's mouth kept moving. No sound came out. Wahlburger's rage continued in perfect, silent pantomime. Harry lowered his wand. Right, he said mildly. Back to bed, everyone. The family dispersed without argument, some still chuckling softly as they went. Doors closed. Footsteps retreated. Vernon stood shaking, red-faced, humiliated. We are not sleeping in that room, he sputtered. Harry met his eyes once. Harry met his eyes, unflinching. Yes. You are. The biggest room, remember. The house creaked, pleased. Eventually, Grimmauld Place settled again. Christmas Eve held.
Chapter 8. Merry Christmas.
Grimmauld Place woke slowly. It did not explode into noise the way it sometimes had in the past. It eased itself awake, light creeping in around the edges of the curtains, the faint crackle of a fire being coaxed back to life, the low murmur of voices testing the day. The kitchen filled first. Molly was already there, of course, sleeves rolled, hair pinned back with determined practicality. Ginny moved beside her, efficient and quick, while Hermione consulted a handwritten list that kept reordering itself. Fleur arrived next, radiant and unbothered, Teddy balanced easily on her hip, Bill trailing behind her with coffee and a grin. Soon there were too many pans and not enough counter space. Vernon appeared briefly, surveyed the room with suspicion, and announced that he would only be eating what Petunia prepared. No one argued. Petunia cooked anyway, movements precise, expression unreadable. Harry stood in the doorway for a moment, taking it all in. He had not woken up to this since, ever. "Sit," Molly said, pointing with a spoon. He did. By the time the food was ready, the table groaned under the weight of it. Eggs, bread, sausages, pastries Fleur insisted were traditional somewhere, porridge that Arthur examined with academic interest. Laughter threaded through it all, loose and easy. Arthur cornered Dudley halfway through breakfast. "So this university," he said, eyes bright. "You're studying what, exactly?" "Chemistry," Dudley replied, warming as he spoke. "Reactions. Systems. Predictable outcomes." Arthur beamed. "Entire disciplines built without magic. Extraordinary." Vernon pretended not to listen. Petunia absolutely did. After breakfast came presents. They gathered in the sitting room, the tree glowing steadily, ornaments catching the firelight. Wrapping paper piled quickly, laughter rising with it. Teddy squealed at everything, hair shifting color with every surprise. Dudley unwrapped something large and immediately meaningless, nodded politely, and set it aside. Harry watched hands open packages he'd chosen the night before, watched faces soften, brighten, laugh. He did not need thanks. Later, someone put on music. Mrs. Weasley insisted on Celestina Warbeck's Christmas album, singing loudly and incorrectly. George harmonized badly on purpose. Ron tried to keep time and failed. Arthur asked questions about the record player that derailed an entire song. By midday, the house had loosened completely. Charlie told stories about dragons that nearly burned down facilities. Bill added details. Molly scolded. Flo laughed. Ginny talked Quidditch with anyone who would listen, describing the Holyhead Harpies with fierce pride. Snow fell steadily outside. Inside, the fire burned low and content. The front door rattled sometime after noon. Harry opened it to find Hagrid nearly filling the frame, beard dusted with snow, grin wide. "Merry Christmas, Harry." Behind him stood Professor McGonagall, immaculate as ever, tartan scarf tucked neatly into her coat. "We were passing through London," she said dryly, "and thought it would be remiss not to call." Hagrid wheeled in the motorbike, polished and gleaming. "Fixed her up proper," he said proudly. "Thought she belonged with you." Harry swallowed. "Thank you." McGonagall's gaze softened. "You've done well, Harry." They stayed just long enough to warm themselves, to drink tea, to be folded briefly into the chaos, and then they were gone again, leaving behind snow and something quietly acknowledged. The afternoon blurred. Games were played. Teddy napped. Creature produced more food than seemed physically possible and accepted praise with rigid dignity. At some point, someone suggested carols again, and this time even Vernon endured them in silence. Dinner came early and stretched long. Candles burned low. Plates emptied. The house glowed. Harry sat back in his chair, watching it all, the noise, the movement, the life. The tree stood steady. The lights along the banister hummed softly. Grimmauld Place creaked once. Not in protest. In satisfaction. For the first time in a very long while, Christmas did not feel like something that would vanish the moment he reached for it. It stayed.
Chapter 9. Quiet, but not the same.
Leaving took longer than anyone expected. It always did. Coats were gathered, then set down again. Someone remembered something they meant to say. Someone else forgot something they meant to take. Promises were made in doorways and repeated on the steps, louder, as if volume might turn them into certainty. Charlie hugged Harry hard, once. "Don't be a stranger." "I won't," Harry said, and surprised himself by meaning it. Hermione lingered near the door, eyes moving slowly through the hall, the lights, the tree still glowing softly in the sitting room. "You know," she said quietly, "it didn't feel temporary." Harry nodded. "No." She smiled, satisfied, and stepped into the cold. Bill and Fleur left next, Teddy bundled between them, waving enthusiastically at absolutely everyone, hair shifting color with each goodbye. Molly cried openly. Arthur promised to write immediately and then asked Harry if the post owls still came regularly. The Dursleys were last. Vernon muttered something about traffic and hotels and never again, already halfway down the steps. Dudley paused at the gate, hands in his pockets. "Thanks," he said, awkward but sincere. Harry nodded. "Any time." Petunia lingered just behind Dudley. She looked back at the house, really looked, at the dark brick, the iron railings, the quiet steadiness of it all. Then she turned and left without a word. The street emptied. The door closed. Silence returned gradually. Not the sharp, waiting silence of before, but something looser. Softer. The kind that didn't demand anything. The tree still stood in the sitting room, lights dimmed now, ornaments steady. The smell of pine and food lingered in the air, warm and familiar. Wrapping paper had been folded neatly and stacked to one side, as if even the mess had agreed to behave. Harry stood in the middle of it, hands in his pockets, unsure what to do now that there was nothing left to manage. Ginny found him there. She didn't speak at first. Just stepped close, leaned into his side, easy and unassuming. "Well," she said eventually. "That was Christmas." Harry laughed, low and real. "Yeah. It was." They stood together for a while, listening to the house settle around them. Somewhere above, a floorboard creaked. Somewhere deeper in the walls, a pipe ticked as it cooled. Creature appeared in the doorway, surveying the remains with a critical eye. "Creature will clean," he announced. "The house has been properly used." "Thank you, Creature," Harry said. Creature sniffed. "As it should be." He disappeared again, already muttering about crumbs and pine needles. Ginny tilted her head, studying Harry. "You okay?" Harry thought about it. About the noise. The laughter. The screaming portrait. The quiet afterward. "Yeah," he said. "I am." She smiled, satisfied with that. Outside, the light faded gently, evening settling in without ceremony. Grimmauld Place did not protest. It held the day the way it had learned to, not tightly, not fearfully, just enough to remember it. "I could get used to coming home here," Ginny said lowly. "I could get used to that too." Harry replied. Ginny smiled at him, kissed him on the cheek, took one step out the doorway, and said, maybe. With a wink, then disapparated. Harry closed the door. Christmas, it turned out, didn't end when everyone left. It stayed.